This is Blair, your cancer care bear. No hair, don't care. All faith, no fear. And you are now in the Blair podcast. Welcome to the vibe. Is stopping your friend from making the biggest mistake of their life worth losing the friendship? That was a tweet made Wednesday night by actress Ebony Obsidian, one of the co-stars of Tyler Perry's series Sistas, which is one of my favorite shows on television right now. So shout out to Ebony Obsidian. I hope I got that name right. Personally, I would say yes, or lean more towards that answer, yes. You know, lately there's been a lot of revelations in my life when it comes to personal relationships, whether business, whether, other intimate relationships. And I'm gonna try not to be here with you long. So I do want to thank you all for tuning in for another episode. This is episode 19. There was a couple delays, for, personal matters. But I'm going to read this question again. Is stopping your friend from making the biggest mistake of their life worth losing the friendship? And I'll say this. Me being a believer and a man of faith, man of God, I want to say yes because First Thessalonians 4:11 says, mind your own business and work with your hands. And I'll give it a little bit more context. As I woke up just this morning, and I got into my devotionals, reading my word, scripture. I want to share this with you. First Thessalonians 4:9-12. That's the read. But I'm going to read you the devotional for today. I'm going to share that with you, and we can have a little bit more context with the content of that question that was brought upon Ebony Obsidian. And I'll get more into, the whole gist of the series Sistas, which is a great series. One time for Tyler Perry, because it is a Tyler Perry series. So yeah, today's devotional. Years ago, My son Josh and I were making our way up a mountain trail when we spied a cloud of dust rising in the air. We crept forward and discovered a badger busy making a den in a dirt bank. He had his head and shoulders in the hole and was vigorously digging with his front paws and kicking the dirt out of the hole with his hind feet. I'm sorry. He was so invested in his work, he didn't hear us. I couldn't resist and prodded him from behind with a long stick lying nearby. I didn't hurt the badger, but he leaped straight up in the air and turned towards us. Josh and I set new world records for the 100-yard dash. I learned something from my brashness. Sometimes it's best not to poke around in other people's business. That's especially true in relationships with fellow believers in Jesus. The Apostle Paul encouraged the Thessalonians to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands. That's 1 Thessalonians 4:11, as I mentioned in the beginning. We're to pray for others and seek by God's grace to share the scriptures. And occasionally we may be called to offer a gentle word of correction. But learning to live a quiet life and not meddle into others' lives is important. It becomes an example to those who are not now outside God's family. It's verse 12. Our calling is to love each other. Reflect on this. What happens when you meddle in other people's business? What's the first thing you should do instead for others? What's the first thing you should do instead for others? God, teach me to know what it means to love others better. That's the prayer. Insight. The church at Thessalonica, I think I pronounced that right, and perfect like all human organizations, was nevertheless one of the premier congregations in the New Testament. Established by Paul, Silas, and Timothy, that's in Acts 16, 1 through 5, 17, 1 through 3. This church quickly became a hub of missionary activity and part of the profound witness the Thessalonians presented of the transformation power of the gospel. Paul applauds this transformation in the opening verse of this letter, where he says that their witness had reached throughout their land. They tell how you turn to God from idols to serve the living and true God. 1 Thessalonians 1:9. In a first century Greek culture that proliferated with idols, their turning away from them speaks of dramatic change. Turning away from dead idols of wood and stone to the God who is not only living but life-giving to all who trust him. From ideology to a living faith in the living God, the Thessalonians displayed true transformation. That might have been a lot for some of you, but I think it was very important because I too, and it seemed like it seemed like it was almost prophesized, because last couple episodes I talked about relationships and friendships and building and knowing, when to, how to treat others and stuff. And then when Thessalonians 4:11 said, mind your own business and work with your hands. And then even when I was reading, this note about Josh and the other gentleman, right? It mentioned Paul, how he was telling the Thessalonians to make it your own ambition to lead a quiet life. and then how we should pray for others and seek by God's grace to share the scriptures, and occasionally we may be called to offer a general word of correction. That is very vital because we live in a such a microwave society, such a digital society now, and I understand that a lot of people believe that the biblical times were the biblical times. Sure, they didn't have internet back then. Sure, there wasn't fashion designers and all that stuff back then, but these instructions still apply. You can still use these instructions for other things. Everything is a symbol. And also, let me double down on the last part. When you're a follower of God or a believer in God and a believer in Scripture and the Word, and it says it becomes an example to those who are now outside God's family. That's those who don't believe, who not really traditionally, followers and Christians or Muslims or whatever. That's important. So it's kind of wild because on Wednesday, the show Sisters comes on Wednesday night at 9. And I've seen that tweet later on. Like, I missed the show a couple times. I DVR it. But when she posed the question, because I've been following it, and, she plays a character, Karen. She's one of the young ladies on the show who, she has, her own hair salon. She's been on and off with this gentleman who's like ex-con. He's kind of like an underachiever, I guess, if you will. And then she met this other guy, Aaron, who's a pastor. And it's reality. This is really what happened. This really happens. Things like this really happen. And then she's helping her friend, her and three other ladies. They have a sisterhood. But Karen, she's best friend with one of the main characters, Andy's, who's played by KJ Smith, who you might also see in other Tyler Perry movies and other films like The Available Wife. But she was dealing with this married man, and he had some secrets, and she almost lost everything behind him and his foolishness. And apparently, in college, she dealt with a similar situation, and it kind of almost cost her life. So as a friend, Karen is trying to tell her, like, you need to leave this man alone. They, after everything that happened with the gentleman, the married man, it was almost like, okay, this is it. She learned her lesson. He kind of did some dirt that she was kind of skeptical about. Because I do recommend y'all follow up on the series. But I'm just trying to give a little backstory, because I want to kind of like segue this into my own personal situation. But when you're in love, when you love somebody, sometimes you do some unspeakable things. You do some foolish things, do some crazy things. And I want to believe that love make you do that. And I don't want to say that it doesn't, but at some point, we have to start having self-care, self-love. So Karen, being the voice of reason for, Andy or whatever, because, and yeah, and don't get me wrong, Karen has her own, drama, supposedly at some point in a love triangle, but, She's trying to explain to Annie, like, why are you still dealing with this man after everything he's done? You gave him so many chances. You gave him forgiveness. It's time for you to, you gotta worry about yourself. So when you think about your friendships with people, like, cause sometimes friends, sometimes even children, parents, we does not listen. It's kind of similar to the same instance with this other show I watch, All American, with Tay Diggs and Breeze and all that stuff. And I'll say that for another time. But it's very vital to mind our business sometimes. And I'm a Cancer. I'm sensitive. I'm empathetic, understanding. I take pride in the things that I say, the things that I do, how I treat people. I wish I could give my heart to everyone. I wish I could give the best advice. And sometimes I do. I do have people who do come to me for advice. And me, I take pride in my relationships, my friendships with my brothers and the women in my life and children. I take pride in those relationships. And sometimes sometimes we just have to realize that some people grow apart, some people can't go with us. And same thing the other night, the same night that Sisters come on. I had to deal with my own relationships with people. Maybe I might be saying this prematurely, but I lost a brother of mine. But they didn't die. But we apparently, it's unreconcilable differences. There's a trust and loyalty between us that's not matching. And not to get too much into it at this moment, but we apparently we grow apart. There's a lot of bottled emotions. When you keep things bottled in, it's detrimental to, any relationship. We're in a time now where, mental health is, it's kind of like front and center, is a vocal point. And I think we have to take advantages of the times because even, again, like I mentioned, everybody's not a follower, everybody's not a believer of scripture and, God and all that. So we have to keep that in mind. And a lot of times when your foundation is different from those of your circle, when you might have different faiths and different belief systems and or relationships with God or your high power, whatever, it's gonna bound to, be challenged. And sometimes when you have such close relationships, you're bound to know certain things about a person. You're bound to, know certain secrets and have certain information. Now, if it's unwarranted, then that's something that's totally different. But as a friend, as a brother, me personally, I try to, yeah, I'll be a true friend, true brother, and be like, hey, if I feel like somebody's been done wrong, I'm open about it. If I wrong someone, I'll acknowledge it, try to mend it. However, at the same time, it has to be just. It has to be fair. Because I will say this: when you're not really affected that much, like when it's you, when you're like when you're not the aggressor, I should say. When you're not on pressure, it becomes an issue because you got to try to put yourself in that position. You have to try to figure out the context of it, and it's safe to say that there is some certain situations in your relationships where one friend can remember something and you might not remember it. So even the same thing with Karen and Andy of Sisters, they have a relationship, a friendship, and you have this one friend who is so deep in with someone they have no business being in deep with. Life starts to become more I understand life a little bit more as I get older, as I experience and understand why scripture is scripture. Now, again, to me, the Bible is scriptures, it's instructions, it's nothing's new under the sun. Yes, some people might say these are rules and guidelines that or like people need to follow, that people set to follow. But I'm gonna be honest, there's a reason. I don't believe that we was just put on this earth just to figure it out. And if we was, I still think it's important that we have some type of structure. It's the same. It's like being a parent. You have to set some boundaries and rules for your children so they can become old. When they become older, they can, survive. Everybody's not going to agree. Everybody's not going to like it, but it's for the betterment of your well-being. Sometimes when you're stuck in your ways and comfortable living the life the way you want to, you kind of start getting like seeing things and feeling offended and feeling personal, where anything that you disagree with, it's hateful or something. And it's like, nah, there's a reason. But like I said, God is the creator. It's okay to question him. It's okay to, not know, but we have to remember, we have to do our best to show compassion and consideration. So that's why even, when we are minding our business, like when Thessalonians 4:11 said, mind your business and work with your hands. It just pretty much means like, hey, just mind the business that pays you. Bible has, it's not, everything's not literal, but it's figurative, but it's symbols, it's symbolization. So even, I just find it wild to me that it's been a rough couple days, and I'm like, man, this is 2020 was the year of 2020 vision. It's like the year of insight, and then 2021 is still, it's still Everything from last year is still happening, but there's more and more revelations coming. More relationships are changing, growing, breaking, whatever. But I just find it important that that particular scripture just kind of was today because I was thinking about it and I'm like, man, we have to mind business because, again, like I said, I'm cancer, I'm the cancer care bear, as I always mention. But I have to learn to mind my business, because for someone who does care, like again, this is the unsolicited podcast. This is the unorthodox podcast. Nobody asked for this, but I'm just expressing my, trying to express my views as well. Try to give good insight, good perspective, good advice for those who might be seeking truth and seeking help. And we we're in a different time now where everybody's offended by something, but majority rules. But you still have to keep your foundation strong. If you live by a certain code, you live by that, but you got to remember that there are some codes that you grow out of. There are some codes that you might not live by like your peers do or your circle do, because we all have our own codes. I have a man code. I have a brother code. I have a God code, a G code. And to be honest, I grew out a lot of those, but they shifted. I take a lot of pride in my relationships, my friendships. And a lot of times when those are challenged or questioned, it becomes hard and a problem for me, because then I have to look at myself and try to readjust myself and say, where did I go wrong? What did I do? Which is normal. That's what we are supposed to do. That's what any adult or man, at least me, should we should do this. We should do this every day. We should always have a spring clean. But I just felt like that was a very interesting question. It was an ironic question because I'm like, hey, I've been through this. I'm going through this right now. For me to have a relationship with someone for so long, and then for everything to kind of explode the way it does, the way it did, it gets to me. It's heartbreaking. It was unexpected, but that's growth. We're never. They say we should always be ready, so we never have to get ready. But we're not ready for certain things. But that doesn't mean that we're not equipped to handle it. No, I'm equipped to deal with loss. I'm equipped to deal with disappointment. I'm equipped to deal with hate. Just like I'm equipped to, give love, have faith, and lead. Whether it's wanted, whether it's appreciated, or whether you're ready. So I just wanted to give that to y'all, blessed ones. We should mind our business. I understand it now. I say, hey, how can we mind our business? Everything matters. Everybody, what somebody else does affects us. And Yeah, but I get it now. We sometimes, you have, sometimes it's not your place to check somebody at that time. We can only pray that occasionally. But when it comes to personal relationships, and they might be putting themselves in a position, and it's going to affect you if you care, but you have to sometimes fall back. And that's pretty much what I got from this, message devotion today. It's pretty much what I have to say about the question that Ebony of Sedina. I'm sorry, I said her name wrong, but Ebony from Sistas, Karen, who plays Karen on Sistas, said. So I just tell y'all, blessed ones, just continue to be safe, stay positive, stay productive and prosperous. Run your race, handle your business. And like I said again, some relationships won't last forever. Thank you for listening. Blair.